Across the dry galaxy, people spoke in fear and hope about a single human man. A man living on a forgotten desert moon. A man who carried the last clean water known to exist. His name was Aren Hale, but most travelers only called him one thing, the Waterkeeper. No one knew how he survived the heat, the storms, or the endless dangers roaming the burning dunes. But everyone knew one truth. If you reached his small stall alive, you might touch water that could save a life. Aren lived far away from trade routes, far from cities, and far from every war. His stall stood alone on sand that stretched beyond the horizon. Just 4 wooden posts, a torn cloth roof, and a small glowing container of water that never seemed to run dry. People believed it was magic. Others believed it was science. But Aren never explained. He only offered one rule, one price, and one warning: take the water if you truly need it. But never lie to him, never. On this quiet morning, the twin suns rose slowly, mixing red and gold light across the dunes. A soft wind carried dust across Aren's stall as he poured a cup of water into a metal bowl for a small desert creature. He watched the creature drink and run away with gratitude in its bright eyes. Aren smiled softly, because even in a dead galaxy, tiny moments of kindness still mattered to him. But something was wrong today. Aren felt it. The desert was too silent. The wind carried a strange tension, like something heavy was hiding beneath the sand. He placed his hand on the wooden counter and listened. He had a strange gift, something no one understood. He could feel water in any direction, even deep under stone or moving inside a living body. But right now, he felt something else. Something dangerous, something hungry, and he sensed them. 2 life forms moving fast through the dunes, weak, exhausted, nearly out of breath. They were not humans. They were tall, thin, with pale violet skin, and silver markings like liquid metal across their arms. Their clothing was torn from long travel. Their feet burned from walking on hot sand. They were sisters, Lyra and Siren, and they had been searching for Aren for many nights. As they climbed the final dune, both collapsed to their knees. Their bodies shook from dehydration, their eyes almost closed. But when they saw the small glowing container of pure water on Aren's stall, hope returned in their faces. It was the hope that only dying people feel when salvation stands only a few steps away. Aren walked toward them slowly, his face calm, almost peaceful. He carried a cup of the clear water. The sisters stared at it like it was light from heaven. Siren tried to speak, but her voice broke. Lyra tried to stand, but fell again. Aren knelt between them, lifted their heads gently, and held the cup to their lips. They drank the water with shaking hands, tears falling freely as life returned to their bodies. It was real. It was pure. It was the mythical water they had crossed star systems to find, but the ground trembled beneath them. A deep vibration rising from under the sand, the sisters froze in fear. Aren looked over his shoulder toward the dunes, and his eyes hardened. The sand began to rise like waves. Something massive moving beneath it, something that hunted anything with moisture. The desert people called it a sand devourer, a creature older than cities, larger than houses, and always thirsty, Lyra whispered. It followed us, Siren cried. We tried to escape, but it never stops. Aren stood slowly, no fear in his expression. He stepped forward, placing himself between the women and the rising sand. The creature burst from the ground with a roar that shook the air. Its body covered in stone-like plates, its mouth wide with layered teeth. Its shadow fell over Aren, but he did not move instead. He lifted one hand toward the sand. His palm glowed with a faint blue light. The air changed, the wind froze, and for a moment even the creature hesitated. Aren whispered a quiet command, and the sand obeyed him. The dunes shifted into a wave, and slammed into the creature. Pushing it back and burying half its body, the sand devourer roared in confusion. It had never seen a human with such power. Lyra stared in shock. Siren covered her mouth. The stories about the Waterkeeper were true. He was not just a man with clean water. He was something more, something ancient, something the galaxy had forgotten. Aren turned to the sisters with a calm voice. "You should come inside." They followed him into the shelter, still trembling, still unable to understand what they had witnessed. Inside, the glow of the water illuminated the small room. The sisters finally gathered the courage to speak. Lyra whispered, "We came to buy water, but we have nothing left," Siren added. "We sold everything, our home, our ship, our future." Aren looked at them with quiet eyes full of understanding. Outside, the sand trembled again, not from the creature this time, but from approaching engines. Something else was coming. Someone had followed the sisters, someone who also wanted Aren Hale's impossible water. And deep inside his heart, Aren knew this was only the beginning of something much larger, something that would pull the entire galaxy toward him. Because when two desperate sisters arrived at his door, they did not bring only fear, they brought destiny. Aren closed the door of his wooden shelter as the desert wind howled outside. The two alien sisters sat weakly on the floor, their backs against the wall, their breaths still uneven from the long and dangerous journey. The soft blue glow from Aren's water container filled the small room with calm light, but their eyes held fear, worry, and a strange sadness buried deep inside them. Aren placed 2 small cups of water on the table and pushed them toward the sisters. Lyra held her cup carefully, as if afraid it would disappear. Siren's hands trembled so much that a few drops spilled onto the floor. But the moment they drank, color returned to their faces. Their eyes brightened, their strength grew a little. Yet something heavy remained in their expressions. For a moment, nobody spoke. Only the desert wind outside made a lonely sound. Aren watched them quietly. He had seen many travelers. He had heard many stories, but something about these two sisters felt different. They looked tired, but not only from the journey. They looked broken from something deeper. Finally, Lyra lifted her head and spoke in a soft voice. "We came from the world of Seraloon." Aren nodded slowly. He knew the name, a world once filled with forests and oceans, now turning dry and empty. Siren continued, her voice shaking. "Our planet is dying. The rivers are dust. The sky burns. Our people faint from thirst every day," Lyra added. "We heard rumors about a human with pure water, the last clean water in the galaxy." Aren listened without emotion. Though his eyes softened, he did not enjoy being called the last. He never wanted this title, but fate had placed it on him anyway. The sisters exchanged a nervous glance. Then Lyra lowered her head and whispered, "We came to buy water." Aren raised an eyebrow. "Buy?" Siren nodded and tried to smile, but it was full of pain. "Yes, but we have nothing left to offer." Lyra removed a small cloth bag from her belt. She opened it with trembling fingers. Inside were only 2 broken pieces of jewelry, a half-burned identification chip, and a small charm made of bone. "This is all we have," she said. "We sold everything else on the way here." Aren looked at the items without judgment, but he did not reach for them. "And what do you want from me?" he asked. Lyra swallowed hard. "Just 1 container of your water. Enough to save the children in our village," Siren added, tears forming in her eyes. "If we return without it, they will not survive another week." Aren leaned back slightly. His heart tightened. He remembered another group long ago, people who had come with similar desperation. He had given them water, but mercenaries had followed them back and destroyed everything to find the source. That memory cut him deeply. He never forgot the screams, the fire, and the guilt. He looked at the sisters again. You said you have nothing to offer, he said calmly. So why should I trust your words? Lyra lowered her head. Because we have nothing left except our truth, Siren whispered. And our lives, before Aren could answer. The shelter shook. A loud metallic hum echoed from outside. The two sisters froze in panic. Aren stood and moved toward the window, pulling the curtain to the side just a little. A sharp blue light flashed across the dunes, scanning the ground, then another, and another. Lyra grabbed Siren's hand. They found us, she whispered in terror. Aren turned to them, his expression sharpening. Who? Siren inhaled shakily. The Dryblade Syndicate. The name was enough to change the air inside the room. Even Aren felt his jaw tighten. The Dryblade Syndicate was not just a group of thieves. They were one of the cruelest mercenary forces in the galaxy. They hunted rare resources, ancient technology, anything that could make them powerful. And nothing in the galaxy had more value than clean water. Lyra spoke with trembling fear. They think your water is the source of life, a mythical power that can control worlds, Siren added. We tried to hide our trail, but they followed us from Saraloon. They will kill us, and they will take everything from you. Aren's eyes darkened. He felt the energy of the desert shifting again. Like a storm preparing to rise, the Dryblade Syndicate did not retreat, did not negotiate, did not show mercy. He walked back to the table and poured a small amount of water into his hand. The glow reflected across the room. The sisters stared at it in awe. He closed his hand slowly, and the glow faded. As he opened his palm, only dust remained. Lyra gasped softly. What? What are you? Aren shook his head. Someone who tried long ago to save people, he said quietly. And lost them instead? The sisters felt the weight of those words. Siren moved closer and whispered, Please, Aren Hale. If you do not help us, our people will die. Aren's eyes lifted toward the door as another deep vibration shook the ground. The Syndicate ships were landing, engines roaring like monsters from the sky. The sisters huddled together in fear. Aren took a slow breath. Then he spoke with a voice that carried strength, sorrow, and decision all at once. You came here with nothing, he said. But sometimes nothing is the greatest truth of all. He turned toward the door, his hand glowing faintly again with blue light. Stay inside, he said to the sisters. What comes next is not for you to face. And as he stepped outside into the burning desert wind, the sisters realized that the Waterkeeper was far more powerful and far more dangerous than any legend had ever claimed. The desert moon shook again as Aren stepped outside. The sky above him burned with the glow of landing thrusters. Dust lifted in violent waves, mixing with the hot wind. 3 dark ships lowered from the clouds, their shapes sharp and armored. Like flying blades cutting through the air, the Dryblade Syndicate had arrived, and they were not trying to hide their presence. Inside the shelter, Lyra held Siren close, both shaking as the engines roared louder. They knew these ships. They had seen them destroy villages, burn forests, and take people as slaves. Now those ships were landing only meters away from the Waterkeeper's stall. Aren stood calmly in the open. The suns behind him cast a long shadow across the sand. He looked like a lone guardian standing between the arriving army and the 2 terrified sisters inside. The dunes trembled under the ship's weight as they touched down. Their metal doors hissed open, and armed mercenaries stepped out. Their armor was black, their helmets sharp, their weapons glowing with red energy. The leader walked forward, tall and ruthless. His voice echoed through a helmet speaker. Aren Hale, he said. The galaxy's last water maker. Aren didn't answer. He simply watched them with a silent, unreadable expression. His hands were relaxed, but his eyes were sharp, calculating every movement in front of him. The leader gestured to the glowing water container inside Aren's stall. "We know your secret," he said. "Your water comes from the source of life, ancient human power. Lost human science." Aren's jaw tightened slightly. "You know nothing," he replied softly. The leader laughed. "Maybe," he said. "But we know enough to understand that controlling you means controlling every dying world in this galaxy." More soldiers stepped out, forming a circle around Aren. Their boots crushed the burning sand. Their weapons ready, behind them, the ship scanned the dunes with bright blue lights, searching for the sisters who had escaped them earlier. Inside the shelter, Siren covered her mouth. Trying to stay quiet, Lyra whispered, "If they take him, everything ends." Outside, the leader raised his hand, signaling his men. "Aren Hale," he said coldly, "you will give us the source, or you will die." Aren slowly lifted his right hand toward the ground. The mercenaries tightened their grip on their weapons, expecting a fight, but Aren did not summon a weapon. He touched the sand gently with his fingertips. At first, nothing happened. The soldiers smirked behind their helmets. But then the desert began to breathe. The sand rippled in waves like a living ocean. The ground hummed with energy, and a blue glow pulsed beneath the surface. The soldiers stepped back in confusion. "What is that?" One shouted. The leader shouted, "Hold positions," but fear cracked through his voice. Aren raised his head, his eyes glowing faintly. "This desert was once a riverbed," he said. "It remembers water." The dunes around them rose high, forming spirals of swirling dust. The mercenaries fired energy shots, but the sand swallowed the blasts like they were drops of rain. The ground broke open, and a thin stream of water flowed briefly before disappearing again. The soldiers stared in shock, realizing Aren was controlling the land itself. Aren spoke again, his voice steady. "You came here to take life," he said. "But this land only listens to those who protect it." The leader growled and pointed forward. "Attack him!" The soldiers ran, shouting and firing. But Aren stepped back and clapped his glowing hands together. The sand beneath the soldiers softened instantly. Becoming like liquid, their feet sank rapidly, pulling them downward. Guns and armor weighed them deeper as they struggled to escape. Panic spread quickly. Lyra watched through the small window, her eyes wide with disbelief. "He's not fighting them," she whispered. "He's fighting the desert itself." A huge swirl of sand rose like a tornado, surrounding the area and cutting off the syndicate ships from the battlefield. The soldiers trapped inside screamed as the sand pulled at them like a powerful tide. Aren stood at the center, calm like a storm's eye, guiding the land with invisible strings. The leader activated a shield around himself, breaking free from the sinking sand. He shouted in anger, "You think this will stop us? We will take your gift by force." Aren looked at him without fear. "You cannot take what was never meant for you." The leader fired a blast straight at Aren, but the sand rose like a wall, intercepting the attack. The impact exploded in a burst of energy, shaking the dunes and sending a shockwave through the desert. Inside the shelter, the sisters fell to the floor, covering their heads as dust rained from the ceiling. Aren slid back a few steps from the force, but he remained standing. The ground beneath his feet glowed brighter. He raised both hands now, and the desert answered again. The sand around the leader hardened into stone pillars that wrapped around his legs and arms. Trapping him where he stood, the leader struggled violently. You're a myth," he spat. "Humans were never this powerful." Aren's eyes dimmed slightly, sadness flickering inside them. "Humans once healed worlds," he said softly. But the galaxy forgot. The sand pillars squeezed tighter, forcing the leader to his knees. He screamed in rage, but he was completely trapped. The remaining soldiers outside the sand barrier fired desperately, trying to break through, but Aren flicked his wrist, and the dunes rose again, blocking the attacks. Finally, Aren lowered his hands. The desert calmed, the wind softened. The sand sank back into place, the battlefield fell silent, except for the crackling engines of the stranded ships. Aren turned and walked back toward the shelter, his steps slow, his breathing heavy. Controlling the desert drained his strength. Blue light fading from his fingers inside. Lyra and Siren looked at him with awe and fear. Siren whispered, "You saved us." Aren sat down weakly. "This was only the beginning," he said. "They will return. And they will not stop." The sisters exchanged a worried stare. The galaxy had found the Waterkeeper, and now everything was about to change. Inside the shelter, the air felt heavy and warm. Aren sat on the floor with tired eyes, blue light fading from his fingertips like dying embers. Lyra and Siren watched him closely, unsure if they should speak or stay silent. They had just seen him command the desert like it was part of his body. And now they were seeing something even stranger. The weight of exhaustion on a man who carried a power far greater than they had imagined. Siren slowly moved closer, her voice shaking. "Aren? How did you do all that?" He didn't answer immediately. Instead, he took a slow breath and rubbed the sand off his hands. The glowing traces disappeared completely, leaving only the rough skin of a man who had spent his life under the sun. Lyra whispered, "You controlled the sand, the water. The land itself." Aren kept his eyes down. "It is not control," he said quietly. "It is memory." The sisters exchanged a confused look. Siren asked softly, "Memory of what?" Aren lifted his head, his eyes calm yet filled with something ancient. "Memory of the Earth," he replied. Lyra frowned. "Earth? The human homeworld that was destroyed centuries ago?" Aren nodded. "Destroyed or lost, depending on who tells the story." The sisters leaned closer, listening carefully. Outside, the desert wind brushed against the walls like soft whispers. But inside, the truth was louder and heavier than any storm. Aren stood slowly, his body still weak. He walked to the corner of the shelter and pressed his palm against a wooden plank. A faint blue symbol glowed under his hand, and the floor shifted. A hidden door opened beneath them, revealing a staircase descending into darkness. Lyra gasped. Siren held her breath. Aren took a weak lantern from the shelf and motioned for them to follow. "Come," he said. "It is time you understand why the Syndicate hunts me." The stairs creaked as they walked down. The air grew colder, the smell of dust mixed with something sweet. As the lantern light spread across the hidden chamber, the sisters froze in awe. Below the stall was a massive underground cavern, and at the center of it, glowing softly like a living heart, was a huge pool of crystal water, pure, clear, shining with soft blue waves that moved as if listening to their footsteps. Siren covered her mouth. This is impossible," Lyra whispered. "This water is alive." Aren stepped beside the pool and touched the surface lightly. The water glowed brighter, answering his touch as if it recognized him. Ripples of blue light spread across the entire cavern, dancing along the walls like stars reflected on a calm lake. Aren spoke quietly. "This pool is one of the last remnants of Earth's life projects." Siren blinked, confused. "Life projects?" Aren nodded. Before Earth fell, humans discovered a way to create living water. Water that healed land, water that cleansed poisons, water that grew forests and deserts, Lyra whispered. "A power that could save worlds." Aren's expression darkened. "A power that could end them too." He cupped his hand into the pool, lifting shimmering water that floated in the air like liquid light. "This water carries memory," he explained. "It remembers the lands it once touched, and it tries to restore them." Siren's eyes widened. "So you can make water appear anywhere?" Aren nodded slowly. "Yes, but every time I call it, It takes something from me. Lyra stepped closer. What does it take? Aren looked at her with a tired but honest gaze. Time, he said simply. My time? The sisters froze. Unsure what to say, Aren continued. Every drop I create shortens my life. Lyra felt her heart crack. Siren whispered, Then why help us? Aren looked down at the glowing water. Because children should not die thirsty, he said quietly, and because once, long ago, I failed to save people who trusted me. Lyra placed her hand on her chest. Feeling a mix of sorrow and respect, Siren wiped tears from her eyes. They had not known the price of Aren's gift. They had not understood the burden he carried alone. Siren stepped closer and knelt beside him. We did not come to take your life, she whispered. We only hoped for a chance to save our people. Aren shook his head gently. And you will, he said, but before the sisters could respond, the cavern shook violently. Dust fell from the ceiling. Ripples raced across the pool. Lyra grabbed Aren's arm. What is happening? Aren looked toward the stairs with tense eyes. The syndicate, he said. They found the entrance. Siren's breath trembled. They want the pool. Aren stood up, supporting himself against the wall. They want to control worlds. Lyra grabbed his hand. Then we can escape. Take what we can and run. Aren shook his head firmly. If this pool falls into their hands, the galaxy will fall. The cavern shook again. Louder this time, voices echoing down the stairs. Metallic, harsh, hungry, the sisters backed away in fear. Aren's eyes glowed faintly once more, though his body trembled from what he had already done that day. He looked at the pool, then at the sisters, and spoke with a calm but powerful voice. There is a truth you must hear before the syndicate breaks through. Lyra and Siren leaned close. Waiting, hearts pounding, Aren whispered, I am the last water keeper because every other one gave their life to protect this pool. Before they could process the words, a blast shook the chamber again. The syndicate was only seconds away. Destiny was coming through the door. The cavern shook again, harder this time. Stones fell from the ceiling. Dust floated through the air like smoke. And the sound of metal boots echoed down the hidden stairs. The Dryblade Syndicate was close. Too close. Their voices were loud, angry, certain that the treasure of the galaxy was only moments away. Lyra pulled Siren behind her, fear rising in her chest. Siren's hands trembled as she held the strap of her torn bag. Aren stood in front of the glowing pool, his body weak, his breath short, but his eyes filled with a calm determination that made the sisters freeze in place. Siren whispered, Aren, you cannot fight them again. You will die. Aren looked at her with a soft, almost tired smile. Death is not what I fear, he said gently. What I fear is losing what this water was meant to protect. Lyra stepped forward, shaking her head. You saved us already. You owe us nothing more. Aren's gaze moved to the glowing pool. The last living memory of Earth? He spoke quietly. I am the last water keeper, because the others chose to become part of the pool when their time ended. Siren's eyes widened. Become part of the water? Aren nodded slowly. Their lives flowed into it. Their strength, their memories, their hope. The cavern shook again. Louder, the syndicate was shouting commands. Explosions could be heard above them. They were breaking through the shelter floor, moments away from entering the chamber. Lyra grabbed Aren's arm, her voice desperate. We can run, we can hide, we can save this water another way. Aren gently pulled his arm free. If we run, they will follow us forever, Siren whispered. Then we will fight with you. Aren shook his head. You cannot protect this pool, he said softly. But you can protect your world. Lyra blinked in confusion. How? Aren knelt beside the glowing water. He dipped both hands into the pool, and the entire cavern brightened, blue light rising like mist. The sisters stepped back in awe as the water lifted into the air, swirling gently around Aren like a living spirit. He looked at them with deep sorrow and deep peace. "I can give you water that will never run out," he said slowly. "Water that will grow rivers on your world, that will heal your people, that will save your children." Siren felt tears fall down her face. "But you said every drop takes her life." Aren smiled softly. "Some gifts are not meant to be kept." The cavern burst open as Syndicate soldiers finally broke through, armed with heavy rifles and glowing blades. Their leader, bruised and furious, pointed toward the pool and shouted, "Take him alive!" But they were too late. Aren lifted his glowing hands high. The pool responded instantly, rising upward like a great blue wave. Wrapping around him in swirling light, the soldiers opened fire, but their energy blasts dissolved into the glowing water. Turning into harmless sparkles, Lyra screamed, "Aren!" "Stop," Siren cried. "Please, we don't want you to die." Aren looked at them one last time. His voice warm, steady, filled with something gentle and eternal. "Do not cry for me," he said. "Cry for the worlds that forgot the meaning of life." The water rose higher. Lifting him from the ground, the cavern exploded with blue light, brighter than the suns outside. The Syndicate soldiers staggered back, shielding their eyes, their weapons falling uselessly to the floor. The entire chamber trembled as the pool expanded outward, filling every crack, every corner, every stone. Then a massive wave of pure water burst upward, shooting through the ceiling, through the desert surface, into the open sky. The dunes outside split open, and rivers erupted from the ground. The dry moon transformed into a world of waterfalls and shining lakes. The Syndicate ships were swept away by the flood, thrown into the horizon like toys. Lyra and Siren were pushed back against the cavern wall by the blast of water, but the wave did not harm them. It flowed around them gently, as if protecting them. And in the center of the shining pool, Aren Hale stood like a fading silhouette, his body dissolving into blue light, becoming one with the water, becoming one with the memory of Earth, becoming the final guardian who gave everything so others could live. His last words echoed softly through the glowing chamber. "Carry this gift home. Save them, let life return." Then he was gone. No body, no shadow, only the water, calm and alive. Lyra fell to her knees, tears streaming. Siren covered her face, shaking with grief and wonder. They had not just witnessed a sacrifice. They had witnessed a rebirth. The galaxy's last water keeper had become the water itself. The pool settled, glowing softly. A small container floated to the sisters' feet, filled with the same shimmering water Aren had protected his whole life. Lyra picked it up with trembling hands. Siren whispered, "We will protect it. We will honor him." Above ground, the dead desert moon now sparkled with rivers, lakes, and clouds forming in the sky for the first time in centuries. The Syndicate had been washed away. Their threat ended, their greed drowned. Lyra and Siren walked out of the cavern into the newborn world, carrying the gift Aren left behind. Behind them, the wind whispered through the new waters, carrying a final message across the galaxy. Humans do not rule the stars, but sometimes they save them.